Okay, so think about this for a second. You're driving, right? Or maybe you're shooting hoops, or even just walking across a room. It might seem pretty basic, but all that stuff, how we move and sense the world, it's seriously complicated when you break it down.
Yeah, and we kind of take it for granted, like all that development that's been happening since, well, forever, like even before we were born. And it just keeps going, shaping how we experience everything.
It's wild, right? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We've got a mountain of research on how all those skills, motor, sensory, all that stuff, how it develops from when we're tiny babies all the way to, well, not so tiny adults.
It's like a deep dive into the instruction manual for being human, but way more interesting than that sounds. You know, you see a baby learning to walk and you just think, ah, cute. But understanding the how and the why is super fascinating.
Totally. And it's not just about those cute baby steps, right? It's about understanding the changes throughout life, like what makes things harder as we get older. Okay, so first up, motor development, how we learn to move. The old school thinking was that it was all about genetics.
Yeah, like a set program, right? You hit a certain age, boom, new skill unlocked. Like Arnold Gussell, he was all about that. Hours and hours of observation, charting out those
But
milestones.
like, things aren't that simple, are they? What about this dynamic systems theory that sounds a lot more, I don't know, dynamic?
Right, so it's not just a pre-programmed sequence. This theory says babies actually put those motor skills together themselves. It's about wanting something like reaching for a toy, and then through trial and error, figuring out how to actually do it.
So it's about like motivation driving the learning. That's cool.
Totally. And their bodies, their nervous system, their environment, all that plays a role. So for example, that baby reaching for the rattle, right? They need the muscle control, the arm length, the strength, and they got to actually want that rattle. Then it's about experimenting, seeing what works, what doesn't, and refining those movements.
Makes sense. It's like this constant back and forth. Try, fail, adjust, try again.
Yeah, and it's not just random movements, right? They're building on what they already know, getting better each time. Even with things we think of as automatic crawling, walking, it's all about adapting, figuring out what their bodies can do.
You mentioned four big ideas in this dynamic systems view: embodied, embedded, enculturated, and enabling. So embodied, that's about how our bodies themselves influence movement, right?
Yep, it's about the physical. So a kid trying to ride a bike, they might not have the strength or coordination when they're smaller, but as they grow, same bike, easier to ride, their body changes, and that changes what they can do.
Like literally embodying skills. Okay, what about embedded?
Embedded is all about how our environment shapes our movements. Like the world throws us curveballs, literally. Hills, narrow spaces, things to climb over. It's about adapting, learning to move differently based on where you are.
Adapting to the world around us, got to be flexible. Now, enculturated, that sounds like it brings in the human element.
Definitely. It's about how social stuff and culture shape motor development. Like, think about parents helping babies walk, holding their hands, encouraging them. Those early experiences are super important.
But it goes even deeper than that, right? Like different cultures, different approaches.
Absolutely. In some cultures, there's a lot of massage and stretching of babies' limbs, like in parts of Africa, India, the Caribbean. And the Gusii people of Kenya, they encourage a lot of movement in infants.
Wow, and that actually makes a difference in how quickly they hit those milestones.
Yeah. It seems to. On the flip side, there are cultures where babies are swaddled tightly or aren't given a lot of freedom to move around. That can slow things down. Even cradle boards, which are common in some indigenous cultures where babies are like strapped in for a lot of the day, can affect when they start crawling and walking.
It's amazing how much culture can impact something we often think of as purely biological. Okay, last one, enabling. What makes motor development so enabling?
Think of it like this. As babies gain those motor skills, they unlock a whole new world. Crawling, walking that lets them explore on their own, reach things they couldn't before.
And that leads to like a chain reaction.
Exactly. More exploration, more interaction with people and things, and that fuels their cognitive development, language skills, all that good stuff. It's like a domino effect.
So it's all connected. Cool. Okay, let's rewind a bit and talk about reflexes. Those first movements we make, what are they all about?
Reflexes are like pre-programmed responses. They're automatic, no learning required, and they're there to help babies survive in those first few months.
Like survival instincts, but for babies. Give us some examples.
Okay, so the rooting reflex, you touch a baby's cheek. They turn their head towards it and open their mouth, looking for food. Sucking reflex, super important for feeding, obviously. And then there's the moro reflex, that startle response. If a baby feels like they're falling, they throw their arms out like they're trying to grab onto something.
Makes sense. Got to hold on tight. Do all these reflexes stick around forever?
Some do, like coughing, sneezing, blinking. Those are important for survival, so they stay with us. But others, like the rooting and motor reflexes, they fade away as the baby's brain matures and they gain more control over their movements.
It's like they graduate from reflexes to more deliberate actions.
Exactly. And some of those early reflexes actually lay the groundwork for later skills. Like the grasping reflex, a baby will automatically grab onto anything you put in their hand. That eventually turns into intentional grasping, reaching for things they want.
So it's like they're practicing, even if they don't know it. But not all babies are exactly the same, right? Like some are better at certain things.
Definitely. Some babies are born with a strong sucking reflex, others not so much. It can take time for them to find a rhythm that works for them. And our understanding of reflexes is changing. They aren't completely automatic. Babies actually have some control. They might change their sucking to hear a sound better or make stepping motions with their legs.
It's like they're little scientists testing things out. Okay, let's talk about those bigger movements now, gross motor skills. What's the foundation for all that?
Posture, posture, posture. It's the starting point for everything. Holding your head up to see, balancing on one leg to walk, all that. And it's a constant balancing act, using input from your muscles, joints, and your inner ear to keep you upright and oriented.
So it's way more than just standing up straight.
Yeah.
What's the typical order of those gross motor skills in babies?
First, they gain head control. Within a few weeks, they can hold their head up for a bit. Then they start lifting their head and chest when they're on their tummy. Sitting with support comes next, around 2 months. Then sitting independently around 6 or 7 months. Pulling themselves up to stand happens around 8 or 9 months. And then that big moment, standing on their own, usually between 10 and 12 months.
And then everyone's waiting for that first step, right?
Yeah, walking. It's a perfect example of how movement and posture work together. Even before they can stand, babies will make those stepping motions if you hold them up. The neural pathways for walking are there early on.
So it's not about learning the steps, it's about something else.
It's all about balance. Balancing on one leg long enough to swing the other one forward, shifting their weight without toppling over. It's tricky stuff, takes a lot of practice.
And that's not just about the mechanics, right? They have to learn to walk in the real world with all its obstacles and challenges.
Karen Adolph did some amazing work on this. She had babies crawl and walk down slopes. And guess what? Babies who were pros at crawling down a steep slope would totally wipe out when they tried walking down the same slope.
Like they forgot how to judge the angle.
It's called specificity of learning, basically. Skills don't always transfer. They had to relearn how to do it while walking. Her research also showed just how much practice babies get. We're talking thousands of steps and tons of falls every single hour.
Wow, that's dedication. So lots of trial and error is key.
Totally. There was another study where babies had to walk across bridges of different widths. Before they even tried, they would check out the bridge, figure out how to adjust their walk, and with practice, they got much better at judging which bridges were safe to cross.
So learning to walk isn't just about walking. It's about learning about the world, too.
Exactly. It unlocks so much. They can get to new places, interact more with people, and all that helps their brain development and language skills.
Okay, let's talk milestones. Like, what are the big ones in that first year? And how much do babies actually vary?
Well, the order is usually pretty consistent, but the exact timing, that can be all over the place, especially for things like standing and walking independently. We're talking a range of 2 to 4 months. And experience matters a lot. Like, when doctors started recommending babies sleep on their backs to prevent SI days, we saw babies crawling later. It's also totally normal for some babies to skip crawling altogether or find their own unique way to get around before they walk.
So there's no one-size-fits-all.
Right.
Every baby finds their own path.
Right. Bigger babies, babies who grow a lot in that first year, breastfed babies, they tend to hit milestones a little earlier. And things like if the mom smoked during pregnancy can delay things. But the big picture is that development is about so much more than just hitting those milestones at a certain time. It's about interaction, exploration, learning from the world around them.
So parents, chill out a little, right? Okay, what about toddlers? Year 2, they're on the move. What's happening with their gross motor skills?
It's all about getting more skilled and coordinated. They're running, though maybe a little stiffly at first. Their balance is better. They can squat and stand up, walk backward, kick a ball, jump. It's a time for them to really practice and explore. Within safe limits, of course.
So let them run free. Well, As free as you can safely let a toddler run.
Exactly. It's not about structured exercise classes, it's about letting them figure things out on their own. They're constantly adapting, getting better at adjusting their movements to their bodies and their environment.
Okay, fast forward a bit. Childhood. What kind of gross motor skills are developing now?
Preschoolers, they just love to move. It's pure joy. Hopping, jumping, running around, and they're so proud of themselves for it. 4-year-olds, they get more adventurous, climbing, exploring the playground. 5-year-olds even more so, and they love those games of tag and racing. Then in middle childhood, things get really smooth and coordinated. They're mastering sports, riding bikes, swimming.
So the clumsy toddler phase is officially over.
Pretty much. At this age, boys often do better than girls in gross motor skills. But it's important for all kids to develop these skills. If they don't, they might get left out of games and sports, which can be tough socially. And it can even affect how active they are later on.
So getting those skills down early can have a long-term impact.
Totally. Organized sports can be great for encouraging activity and building those skills. Plus, there are all those other benefits: teamwork, competition, self-esteem. But of course, you got to be careful with the pressure to win and the risk of injuries.
Balance is key in sports and in life. Okay, let's talk about the older crowd, teenagers and adults. What happens to those gross motor skills then?
Teenagers, they keep getting better as their bodies mature. Most people, whether you're an athlete or not, hit your peak performance before 30, usually somewhere between 19 and 26.
So enjoy your athletic prime while it lasts.
Right. And then after 30, well, things start to slow down a bit. It's gradual, but most bodily functions decline, including those related to movement.
And that's when those aches and pains start setting in.
Sometimes. We see declines in things like cardiovascular function, muscle strength, bone density, even brain function. Balance and flexibility can also become issues. And yeah, older adults tend to move more slowly, even with everyday tasks.
So staying active becomes even more important.
Hugely important. It helps maintain mobility, which is crucial for independence and can even have positive effects on cognitive function. Things like obesity and heart health can affect mobility, but staying active, maintaining a healthy weight, and staying social can all help.
And then there's that big concern with older adults, falls.
Yeah, falls are a huge risk as we age, especially for women. And if you fall once, you're more likely to fall again. It's actually a leading cause of injury-related death for people over 65. And hip fractures are a big concern. They can be really serious. But the good news is exercise can make a huge difference in preventing falls.
So keep moving, people.
Exactly. And it's not just about how many years you've lived, it's about your overall health, biological age versus chronological age. If you're healthy and active, those declines in motor skills tend to be less severe.
It's all about taking care of yourself. Okay, let's move on to those smaller, more precise movements. Fine motor skills. Where does that all begin?
Fine motor skills, that's all about those tiny, detailed movements, mostly with our hands and fingers. Newborns, they don't have a lot of control yet, but they've got the building blocks for it. And watching them develop those skills to reach and grasp is amazing.
It's like they're figuring out how to use these tiny tools attached to their hands.
Right. At first, reaching is pretty clumsy. It's all about using the shoulder and elbow. But then they start to get more wrist and hand action, and eventually they master that thumb and forefinger pincer grasp. And it's fascinating. By 4 months old, they can reach for things without even seeing their hands. They're using the feedback from their muscles and joints.
It's like they have this internal map of their body. So how about actually holding things?
They start with that whole hand palmar grasp, but by the end of year 1, they get that pincer grip, perfect for picking up small objects. And their grasp is super adaptable. They change it depending on what they're holding, size, shape, texture. And get this, even short bursts of reaching practice can make a big difference, even in preemies. It shows how important experience is for development.
Practice makes perfect, even for babies. And what about vision? Does that play a role in grasping?
It does. Younger babies, they rely more on touch to guide their grasp. But by 8 months, they're using their eyes more to figure out how to shape their hand before they even grab something.
So they're learning to plan ahead. What about those sticky mittens studies? Those were interesting.
Those were awesome. They gave babies mittens with Velcro on them so they could grab toys even before they had the dexterity to do it on their own. And guess what? Those babies spent more time exploring objects, they looked at them longer, they even put them in their mouths more.
So just being able to grab stuff made them more curious.
Totally. It shows that giving babies those opportunities to use their hands, even with a little help, can really boost their development. And once they get that pincer grasp down, watch out. They'll pick up everything in sight.
It's like a whole new world opens up. And what about using tools? Are babies even capable of that?
Rachel Keene has done some cool research on this. She's looked at how babies use simple tools like spoons or little rakes, and it turns out they're pretty good at it. They learn to use those tools to get what they want. Like one study showed that babies get much better at banging things by the time they're a year old. It's not just random banging anymore, they're learning about cause and effect.
So they're figuring out how to use tools to make things happen. Pretty impressive. Okay, let's move on to older kids. What's going on with fine motor skills in childhood and adolescence?
They keep getting better and better. And that's because of myelination, that process where the nerve fibers get insulated, which makes signals travel faster. So by age 3, they're building block towers, picking up small things. Still a bit clumsy, but getting there.
Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. 4-year-olds, they're more coordinated, but sometimes so focused on being perfect, they mess things up. 5-year-olds, even better coordination, more creative with building and drawing. And then as they get older, they start mastering things like hammering, tying shoes, writing. By 10 or 12, their skills are almost adult-like.
So they can finally do those complicated crafts and play those instruments that they've been wanting to learn.
Yep. And it's interesting, girls tend to be a bit ahead of boys in fine motor skills at this age. And it's not just about those specific skills. Research has shown a connection between fine motor skills and things like memory, processing speed, even math and reading.
So it's all connected. Those tiny movements are linked to bigger brain stuff.
Yeah.
And what about as we get older into adulthood, do those skills stick around?
They usually do, though there might be some decline, especially in dexterity and hand strength. But for most healthy people, things stay pretty functional. Of course, certain health conditions can affect things, but overall, most people can still handle those everyday tasks.
So take care of your hands. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about how we experience the world, sensory and perceptual development. It's easy to think our senses are just taking in information, but it's way more active than that.
You're right. It all starts with sensation, that raw data coming in through our senses. Light hitting our eyes, sound waves entering our ears, chemicals reaching our nose and tongue, pressure on our skin. Our sensory receptors convert all that into signals our brains can understand.
So our senses are like the input channels.
Exactly. But then comes perception, how our brain actually interprets that information. Those sound waves could be just noise, or they could be music. The light on our retina could be a color, a shape, a familiar face. It's all about making sense of the world around us.
So our brains are actively creating our reality. That's pretty trippy, but there's another way to think about it, right? The ecological view.
Yeah, the Gibsons, they came up with this really cool idea. They said, we don't need to piece together bits of information. Our perception is designed to directly grasp the meaning of the world. It's all about connecting with the environment so we can interact with it and adapt.
So we're not just passively observing, we're actively engaging.
Exactly. And they introduced this concept of affordances, basically, what an object or environment lets us do based on our own abilities. So a chair affords sitting, a handle affords pulling, a steep slope might not afford walking. We're constantly picking up on these affordances, using them to navigate the world.
So we're not just seeing chair, we're seeing something I can sit on. Cool. But how do you even study how babies perceive things? They can't exactly tell you what they see.
Researchers have come up with some clever techniques. They look at what babies prefer to look at, how they react to new versus familiar things, even how their sucking changes when they hear different sounds. And eye tracking technology has been a game changer. You can see exactly where they're looking. Sneaky. Okay, let's focus on vision in babies. Is it true that they see the world as a blooming, buzzing confusion?
Not really. That's a famous phrase, but it's a bit outdated. Babies see things differently than we do, but they're not just overwhelmed by chaos. Their visual acuity is much lower at birth, around 20/20/40 compared to our 20/20, but it gets better fast, reaching 20/40 by about 6 months.
So blurry at first, but rapidly improving.
Now, one thing they're super interested in right away is faces. They love looking at faces, especially their mom's face. And by 3 months, they can match voices to faces, tell male from female, even discriminate between faces of different ethnicities.
Faces are like social magnets for babies. What about patterns and colors? Can they see those?
They can. Even newborns prefer looking at patterns over plain colors. And by a few weeks old, they're really into faces, text, bullseyes, those kinds of patterns. Color vision also develops quickly. They can see some colors by 8 weeks, maybe even earlier. And by 4 months, they start having color preferences like adults, liking those vibrant colors. So, no more boring black and white mobiles. Give them some color. What about those things? Size constancy, shape constancy. Like knowing something stays the same even when it looks different from different angles.
That's perceptual constancy, and it's super important for understanding the world. Size constancy develops early. Babies as young as 3 months show signs of it, though it takes years to fully mature. Shape constancy also starts around 3 months, but it's easier for them with regularly shaped objects.
So they're figuring out that things don't actually change size or shape just because they look different from different angles.
Exactly. And then there's the question of how they see things that are partially hidden. Early on, they only see the visible parts. But around 2 months, they start to get that those hidden objects are actually whole. It's like they're learning the rules of the physical world.
It's like they're little detectives piecing
Yeah.
things together. And what about depth perception? That seems pretty crucial for, not walking off cliffs.
Right. The visual cliff experiment is a classic. They put babies on a platform with a cliff. It's actually glass, so they're safe. Most babies, once they can crawl, won't go over the edge. Seems like they can perceive depth.
Smart babies? But
Mm.
there's some debate about that, right?
Yeah, some people think it's more about social cues or fear of heights than actual depth perception. But there's also evidence that even younger babies react differently to the deep side, like their heart rate changes. So the jury's still out on exactly when true depth perception develops, but we know it's there by the time they're crawling.
So don't test your baby on a real cliff, just in case.
Yeah.
Okay, what about vision in childhood? How does that keep developing?
They get better and better at all those visual skills. They can see more colors, their eye muscles get stronger, which helps with things like reading. Many preschoolers are farsighted, but that usually gets better by 1st grade. It's important to watch out for signs of vision problems, like rubbing their eyes a lot, blinking a lot, tilting their head to see things.
So if you notice any of that, get their eyes checked out.
Definitely. And they're also developing those visual expectations about the world. Like one study showed that how kids search for a dropped object depends on what they expect to happen. If you tell them it rolled into a tube, they'll search differently than if they just saw it disappear.
So they're using their knowledge and experience to guide their vision. What about adulthood, and especially as we age? How does vision change then?
Vision stays pretty stable until those aging effects kick in. And vision is linked to so much of what we do every day. Driving, reading, socializing. So when vision declines, it can impact everything.
It's not just about seeing clearly, it's about how that affects your whole life.
Absolutely. And studies have shown that when older adults have trouble with vision and hearing, they're more likely to have cognitive decline.
So those sensory losses can have a ripple effect.
Okay, let's break down some of the specific changes. Acuity, that sharpness of vision, it declines the most between 40 and 59. That's when people start needing reading glasses. After that, blood supply to the eye can decrease, which can affect your field of vision. The retina can also become less sensitive to low light.
So turning up the lights helps.
It can, and of course there are ways to correct these problems: bifocals, reading glasses, even surgery. In late adulthood, things can get more pronounced. Night driving becomes harder, peripheral vision shrinks, everything just gets dimmer.
Sounds like a lot of adjusting as you get older.
And then there's color vision. It can decline too, especially those green, blue, violet shades. Depth perception also tends to decline, which can make things like stairs tricky.
Gotta watch your step.
And then there are the eye diseases that become more common with age. Cataracts, that's when the lens gets cloudy. It's treatable with surgery, and actually, studies have shown that cataract surgery might even lower the risk of cognitive decline.
Wow, so eye health is brain health.
It seems so. Then there's glaucoma. That's damage to the optic nerve from pressure. Treatable with drops, but if it's not caught, it can lead to blindness. And macular degeneration, that's deterioration of the central part of the retina. It affects a lot of older adults and can lead to blindness if it's not treated.
So regular eye exams are a must.
Absolutely. Early detection is key for all these conditions. Okay, let's move on to hearing. What's the story there?
Yeah, how does our sense of hearing change throughout life? I mean, we hear stuff in the womb, right?
Yeah, you do. In those last couple of months of pregnancy, the fetus can hear the mother's voice, music, all sorts of sounds. There's even research suggesting that babies can learn and remember sounds they hear in the womb.
That's amazing. So we're already learning before we're even born. What about after birth? How does hearing develop then?
Well, at first, newborns need sounds to be louder to hear them, and they're less sensitive to low pitches. But those things improve over time. They get better at localizing sounds, figuring out where they're coming from. But it's a gradual process. Even though they can hear from the start, their ability to hear all the nuances of sound keeps developing throughout childhood.
So those early hearing tests are super important.
They are. If a baby has hearing loss, catching it early is crucial. Hearing aids or surgery can make a huge difference. Teenagers, they usually have excellent hearing, but they're also at risk for damage from loud noises, especially with all the headphones and concerts.
Got to protect those ears.
For sure. And as we get older, hearing loss becomes more common. It usually starts in middle age, around 40, with high pitches being the first to go. Men tend to lose high pitch hearing earlier than women, probably because of more exposure to noise. And then in late adulthood, hearing loss can be a big problem. It affects daily life, makes socializing harder, can even lead to cognitive decline and loneliness.
So hearing loss isn't just about not hearing as well. It affects your whole well-being.
Exactly. There are good treatments, though, like hearing aids and cochlear implants. And research into stem cells is promising.
Okay, let's talk about the other senses: touch, smell, taste. What's the developmental picture there?
Touch and pain, they're present from birth. Newborns respond to touch, and research suggests that gentle touch, even in the womb, can have positive effects on development. And they definitely feel pain. Sadly, this wasn't always recognized, but now we know how important it is to manage pain in newborns.
Poor little ones.
Right, but babies are also remarkably resilient. They have ways of coping with pain, and things like kangaroo care skin-to-skin contact can really help. As we age, touch sensitivity can decline, especially in the legs and feet, and chronic pain becomes more common, especially back pain, nerve pain, and joint pain. It's more common in women, and it can actually affect memory.
So pain isn't just physical. It can have a real impact on cognitive function.
Absolutely. Okay, smell. Newborns, they can tell the difference between good and bad smells. They like vanilla and strawberry, not so much rotten eggs and fish. They can even learn to recognize their mom's scent. But our sense of smell starts declining pretty early, sometimes as early as our 20s, and it gets more noticeable in our 60s. By our 80s, it can be really diminished.
That's sad, losing those familiar smells.
It is, and it's not just about enjoying scents. It can be dangerous, like not being able to smell smoke. And it can affect how much you enjoy food. Some places even add scent boosters to food for older adults.
Interesting. Okay, last one, taste.
Taste is actually present before birth. Babies get those flavors from the amniotic fluid and then from breast milk. They show different facial expressions for sweet, sour, and bitter tastes. And around 4 months, they develop a liking for salt. But as we get older, taste can decline too. It's less of an issue if you're healthy, but medications can really affect how things taste. And a lot of older adults prefer really strongly flavored foods, which isn't always the healthiest choice.
So all those senses, they change throughout our lives. It's fascinating. Okay, let's talk about intermodal perception. What is that?
Intermodal perception is about putting together information from different senses, like seeing a basketball bounce and hearing the thump. It's how we experience the world as a whole. Babies, they actually have some basic intermodal perception from birth. They'll turn their head towards a sound.
So they're making connections between what they hear and what they see.
Exactly. But those connections are pretty basic at first. They get much better at it during that first year. Like by 3.5 months, they'll look more at their mom when they hear her voice. But it takes time to really master that integration of senses.
So it's another one of those things that develops gradually. Okay, big question, nature versus nurture. How much of perceptual development is about genes versus experience?
That's a classic debate. Nativists, they think we're born with a lot of perceptual abilities already wired in. Empiricists, they say it's all about learning and experience. But the truth is, it's way more complicated than that. No one really believes that perception is completely inborn anymore. The Gibsons, with their ecological view, they emphasized how much information is already out there in the environment, and babies are learning to pick up on it. But that doesn't mean everything is innate.
So it's a mix of both.
Definitely. And Piaget, he had this idea that perception depends on cognitive development. So things like constancy and intermodal perception, he thought those developed later than the Gibsons proposed. And there's research that supports both sides, like studies of babies who had cataracts removed at different ages. If the cataracts are removed early, their vision develops normally. But if it's delayed, they have more problems.
So there are these critical periods where experience is crucial.
Exactly. So it's not as simple either. We're born with certain predispositions, but experience shapes and refines our perception throughout life.
Okay, let's wrap up with this idea of perceptual motor coupling. It's about how perception and action are intertwined, right?
Totally, we used to.